Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. And I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. I'm really delighted to have on our guest, Steve Cloward. He's the host of Life After Addiction and Indictment. But today's talk is going to be all about mindset, addictions, trauma, and entrepreneur and resilience. So I'm happy to welcome Steve to the show. Welcome.
Hey, appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. I know we had connected through Podmatch and, in 2 to 3 minutes, just briefly tell the audience who you are and how you came to do what you do.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, my name is Steve Cloward. I've been married for 33 years. I've got 4 boys and a girl, 2 granddaughters. And I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. And I started my podcast about 2.5 years ago after kind of going through a rough time in my life, got diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 1987. And that started a 14-year addiction to opiates. And got sober from that. The reason my podcast is named Life After Addiction Indictment, most people just assume, when they see the addiction side, that I was indicted due to drug, dealing or something. But I'd been sober for many years and had a large real estate appraisal firm. And there was some crazy double mortgage closed deals going on that I had 6 appraisers working for me. And a few of them did appraisals that the loans funded on. When they're on big jumbos, there's 2 appraisals required. They fund off the lower of the 2, which was my guys. And the guy that was doing these deals was doing what's called double closes. So they threw a conspiracy case together. And of course, in a conspiracy case, I got to have a title guy, appraiser, lender, the whole 9 yards. And because they funded on the lower of the 2 appraisals, I was thrown into that indictment with my company and ended up going to federal prison over it.
Yeah. And so, talking about, so one thing is, so you reclaimed your life after, addiction. But one thing you talk about, which is really interesting, is until you change your mindset, you can change your life. So tell us about like that, because it's really, inspiring to see people climb out. We only see the victorious, but
right.
bottom to that's pretty tough to climb.
Yeah, and I made it really tough, honestly. And kind of the reason that I got passionate about this is, number one, I think as human beings, anytime we help somebody, that's what makes me feel the most fulfilled, over any amount of money I make or anything. And so that was obviously a driving force to, try to help people with similar issues. But because I was successful before and then end up spending time in prison, I came out of prison. I couldn't have my company anymore. I couldn't have a real estate appraisal license. So I didn't know what I was going to do. And as you come out, I remember my dad, he was a dentist, and when he retired, I remember him telling me he, kind of didn't know who he was anymore because he wasn't Dr. Cloward. And I didn't really understand that until I came home from prison and got out of the halfway house. And then it was like, man, who am I? Because I didn't have a career. I used to be active in the community and I had the freedom to do certain things to help other people and do things in the community. And now all of a sudden I was like, I didn't know who I was or what I was going to do. And it took me, I spent a lot of money on coaches, courses, consultants, masterminds. And it took me 8 years to finally realize that nobody was coming to save me. And I think one of the biggest hurdles I have, obviously, was the mindset. And one of the biggest issues in my mind was I forgot how much hard work and how many years I put into building a very successful real estate appraisal firm. And I had some other business too. You kind of forget that. And I kind of felt like it happened overnight, which it didn't. So I kind of expected that I just get there overnight, which put me in a trap of looking for shortcuts and thinking that I could just hire this certain person and they would, this manager, and he would take care of things. And all of a sudden, and so I just realized that I was sitting kind of in a victim mentality. And so I just, I was working with a group of guys in a mastermind, and the coach that I was working with, he talked about this conscious self-creation statement. And, I had been exposed to a lot of those things, personal development things, and, manifestation and meditation, whatever, but I'd never really put it into play. I think from a standpoint of how I operated before. And in fact, let me back up a second, because at one of those days at that mastermind, we would do what's called a walk and talk. We'd go through some information for an hour, hour and a half, and then we'd do a walk and talk, meaning you'd get it with a partner and then would walk a certain distance, that was already outlined at the resort we were at. And one of us would talk on the way there, one talk on the way back, to discuss the things that we had just gone over. And I remember saying, before prison, I did this or whatever. I can't remember the topic, but the guy looked at me and said, "Why do you look at your life as before and after?" And that I'd never even thought of it. But as I, really took that in, I realized I was doing that a lot, in other conversations as well, not just at that event, but, for a year or two prior. And it just really woke me up. And so anyway, this conscious self-creation statement is, something where you put together, whatever it is you want to achieve, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to give, anything. But it's basically writing down, I have statements, but then as if you already are there, and believing it and feeling it. And so I did that, and, it's most powerful if you can daily read it, write it, see it, and hear it. Of course, I wrote it out to start. And then once I memorized it, I was saying it out loud. So I would, say it and hear it. I got into this routine of just saying it every morning, right? When I would get in the shower, I'd just do it. And, it was just, it's interesting how that works. And, I think that's becoming more mainstream type stuff these days. But, even 10 years ago, you talk about meditation, I think most people would think that's kind of woo-woo, or wondering what you're talking about, and manifesting and, that kind of stuff. But, within 2 years of doing that, and of course, hard work, I had accomplished the things that I had talked about, other than two things. And I was like, dang, and so, I kind of look at it like I kind of was rewiring my mind, because the more you say something and the more you hear it, whether you realize it or not, you're believing it. You start to believe it. And like I said, I thought I believed everything happened overnight, to get success the first time around. But I also finally realized that wasn't true. And so I needed to stop procrastinating the little things that make a difference. And that also, because I was so broken from a confidence standpoint as well, that when you do those little things and get those little wins each day, it's no different than money compounding. That stuff compounds to build that confidence. And, once I started doing that, everything shifted.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. It's like, so it's basically getting leverage, and it's basically, like you talked about, it's rewiring your neural pathways, forming new habits. And then one thing is talking about is this: stop letting the past get in the way of your future.
Yeah. I just, like I said, I didn't really realize what I was doing, and it was really interesting too, because when I got indicted, I got served a gag order a year before I was handed the federal indictment. And the gag order was basically saying, as an appraiser, my office, we were doing a lot of review work on other appraisals for lenders. And so the way the state investigator pitched it was basically, if we need to see someone else's appraisal, we're going to ask you for it, and, you have to give it to us. And I was like, it's no big deal. I was never told I was a target of an investigation, which they're supposed to, that you should know that. Anyway, when he came and handed me that indictment, I was just I didn't understand how serious that was, But anyway, I don't even remember where my train of thought was going there, but it, like I say, it just was a situation where I was just, like I said earlier, broken. My confidence was just shot.
Mm. Yeah. And then so one thing is what basically you this process of is basically healing yourself and reclaiming your life. And it's once you get there, it's like, you're a different person, you're a better person. And then basically, all of the stuff that happened in the past is kind of cleaning that up. And then one thing is what keep getting in the way of your future before you finally reclaimed your life again?
Yeah, appreciate that, because that was where I was going and I kind of forgot.
Uh-huh.
But, I was, like I said, I was kind of defining who I was as Steve before prison and Steve after. So because I wasn't measuring up to myself on what I thought was meant success, because of the things I had blocking me, which were all created by me, they were all based on the thoughts and beliefs I had, which frankly weren't true. And so I was the one getting in the way. And so until I was able to, number one, it's like addiction. Until, you admit and see that you have a problem and admit it, you have no hope, And so until I was able to really see what was going on and own it, because I believe everything that we have in our lives to the very moment right now is a direct result of choices we made, period. Nobody else, and I used to blame the guy that was kind of the main guy in the case that was doing these deals. I knew him since I was a kid, or I should say my parents knew his parents. My father was a dentist. His father was an orthodontist. They both did real estate developments together. And in 1979, my folks were supposed to be on a plane from Provo, Utah to California with that couple, his parents, and they backed out the night before. And it was January 9th of 79. I remember like it was yesterday, because they ended up taking their two young daughters, 7 and 5, in my parents' place. And that plane crashed that night and killed them all. And anyway, it was the youngest son of the 3 sons that were left that was doing these deals. And, because he knew me, and I mean, we were one of the appraisal firms that he used. And there was a time that, when I got indicted, first of all, I believed he would just, tell the truth and nothing would happen. But so I kind of blamed him for quite a while. In fact, it was a few months into my prison stay that I finally just realized, hey, it wasn't his fault. We didn't have to do the appraisals. It's irrelevant if they were fraudulent or not, and it, like I said, until I just owned things and owned the situation that I was facing in my life and realized that that didn't define me, because before I was totally open when it all happened. I didn't hide it. I wasn't embarrassed or ashamed because I knew the truth. In fact, one of the things that I often say is, in my addiction, when I was fully in my addiction, there are things that would have put me in prison, that I did. But that's what was so weird is this case, there was nothing I was guilty of intentionally doing, that should have landed me there. But it was one of those situations, God works in mysterious ways, and I kind of needed it. Some people that doesn't make sense, but I was just a workaholic. Everything was about money and stuff. And I was thinking that that's also what defined who I was. And, when you get everything taken away, you lose everything. It doesn't take even a few days sitting in federal prison to realize what really matters. And so as I, started to own that and take total ownership of everything in my life, then I was able to move forward and let go of the past. And then, like I said, working on my mind is what helped me move forward.
Interesting. As we come to the end of this, one thing is, what's the number one thing that's allowed you to be successful after the, what's been the number one thing?
I think really just believe, you have to believe in yourself, and then doing things that, you're passionate about, because then, hard work I think it's a no-brainer. It takes hard work no matter what. I mean, even if you get lucky, you put yourself in a position to create that luck, I believe. And to put yourself in that kind of position also took effort and work. There's just no shortcuts. And so just putting in the effort, living your word to yourself, I think is one of the most critical things we can do. Also others. But first, if you can't live your own word to yourself, then you can't live it with others either. And, once you can do those things and just own everything that you have, then in your life, you can create whatever you want and do whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. The and the other thing is talking about is how do you manifest things in your life that you want? Is just basically the law of attraction, or there's this idea of like trying too hard versus like it's supposed to come and flow to you. So I'm curious. I've always tried to understand this dichotomy.
It's such a deep subject in different ways, as I've learned more, because I remember when the law of attraction, The Secret, came out, right? And I remember it's not just going to happen if you put up a vision board. I remember being in family situations with my dad and the brothers and a couple brother-in-laws. And, I was kind of a jerk because I would leave because maybe they were talking about something negative, right? And so I would do kind of, not that that's dumb, but it also depends, is the negativity the true negativity, or are they just talking about something that happens to be negative? Not that they're being negative, but so you have to go much deeper. And, because you can say, you can create your conscious self-creation statement as well, but if you don't feel it, like you have to put yourself in the state of what it would feel like if you're already, living the life that you want, already in the relationship you want, already as healthy, as you'd like to be, or whatever. And because you can't just go through the motions thinking it will happen. That's better not. But, there's a great podcast out there called Next Level Soul on YouTube, that there's some great guys talk about this stuff a lot. And it's just, like I say, if you're just going to go through the motions and think it'll happen, it's not going to happen. But if you're sincere about it and really focus on it, I mean, I know guys that have gotten to the point where damn near, it seems like they can manifest stuff within days. Sometimes, it just takes work,
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. How can people contact you, follow you? I know you have a podcast and, and reach out to you.
Yeah, they can, listen to my podcast. My information's always in the show notes there. You can reach me on Facebook under just Steve Cloward 1, the number 1. LinkedIn, Steve Cloward, pretty much everything, all social media is Steve Cloward. Or my website, lifeafteraddictionandindictment.com. Or you can email me at steve@stevecloward.com.
Yeah. And for all the listeners out there, let's thank Steve for coming onto the podcast. Really, I chose this because mindset and manifesting and rewiring your brain, it takes work. We all have to go through some sort of crisis to get to the next level. So, and all of Steve's resources will be in the links and show notes. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Hey, my pleasure. Appreciate you having me. Thank you so much. Take care.